The 2025-26 Toronto Maple Leafs are just kind of sad. Currently second last in the Eastern Conference, only behind the Buffalo Sabres and tied for bottom 5 in the NHL, the Leafs have been down bad so far. But today, I wanted to talk about this Leafs team, my impressions on their season so far, why I think things have gone downhill up to this point, and if things can even change for the better in the future. So make sure you guys watch till the end as we talk about this Leafs team and what they could be doing next, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now, a bit of a backstory on my expectations with this Leafs team, because I felt pretty low on them going into the year, predicting them to get the second wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. I still thought they'd be a playoff team, but not nearly as good of a regular season as they've had in years past. This was mostly because of my issues with that defense, especially in the puck moving department, and some of my complaints about their wing depth starting to be a bit of a problem, but I still thought they'd be at least serviceable. But the worst part about this Leafs team is that in the past, you could always depend on them to at least get points in the regular season, no matter what the playoffs held. In this case, though, with this iteration of the team, you can't even depend on that, because this season has been brutal, to say the least. But you look at the league-wide standings here, and you can see the Leafs right near the bottom with an 8-9-2 record and only 18 points through 19 games. The points percentage doesn't make it look all that much better either, still in the bottom 5, and especially over the last 5 games, 5 straight losses, which has really exacerbated the issues with this team. The worst part to me when it comes to this Leafs team is that it doesn't even matter, in my opinion, what the record is right now. They could have a few more points, be in the race in the Eastern Conference, but I still wouldn't feel very good about them. They're really a story of two sides right now with the puck. In terms of the goal scoring, it's actually looked pretty good, being top 5 in the league with 67 goals through 19 games. But then when you look at the goals against, they're second last with 72 goals allowed through 19 games. And that is no accident, because the way this Leafs team plays is just so different from what is really successful in the NHL today. I mean, so many teams now are really starting to find the speed and the skating with their defensemen, but it seems like the Leafs wanted to build a defense from 20 years ago, and it just has not worked whatsoever. You have one puck mover, maybe, on this defense in Morgan Rielly, and I don't even think he's been that good in that department this season. This was my main critical issue about this Leafs team coming into the year, is that I look at that defense and they just don't have the ability to get the puck out of their own zone. And what have we seen this season? A fundamental lack of consistency and speed in their decor. And you look at the names. What are you expecting out of Simon Benoit and Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Dakota Mermis and Felipe Myers? I mean, these guys aren't made to get the puck out of their own zone, but it feels like the Leafs just collected a entire group of guys that are just physical defensemen, and that's pretty much it. And I think that kind of limiting in their defensive structure has limited their overall defensive game. When you can't get the puck out of your own zone, it creates so many more problems for you, and this defense is just made of guys that aren't able to bring that speed to their game. It's okay to have 1, 2, maybe 3 of those type of players, but you have to complement them with pairings and partners that can actually get some speed going, can generate some offense, and the Leafs kind of just seem to have forgotten that part. It doesn't help, too, that there's just not really that much youth on the defense either. Morgan Rielly is 31. You have Chris Tanev at 35 years old. Jake McCabe at 32. I mean, you could just keep going down the list. And it's a defense that maybe could be okay in the playoffs, but even then, I think they're still going to be hemmed in consistently because of their lack of any speed whatsoever. And when the Leafs have an opportunity to trade for a young defenseman, they pretty much go for the exact type of defenseman that they already have on the defense all throughout the decor in a player like Brandon Carlo, who has his strengths, but also some pretty big weaknesses in moving the puck and actually creating some offense. It feels like the Leafs in general just wanted to have 6 different defensemen that are all the exact same defensemen, and that is just never going to work. It seems like the Leafs wanted to recreate that Panthers model without realizing why the Panthers are so good, because their defense is really structured for sure, but the defensemen that are even defensive can still get the puck out very consistently. Gustav Forsling is incredible at that. Seth Jones is a pretty solid puck mover. Aaron Ekblad can be when he's really trying in that department. So they have options that aren't just going to be crammed in their own zone every single shift, whereas it seems like the Leafs just kind of forgot about that element. And what makes that defense even worse is that I don't think the offense is very bought in and really carrying the play. I mean, in the offensive zone, when the play is established, they're fantastic and have been fantastic at finishing throughout this season, but they're not exactly great defensive players all throughout this lineup. And even if they are supposed to be, I don't think they're playing those roles as well as they could be. That's what makes me disappointed is that players like Jake McCabe, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, they're not horrible players individually, but they need somebody with a bit of spark on their side, on their pairing, to actually give them some freedom to play that more defensive, structured game. But they just don't have those complementary pieces, and I think that's really been hurting their play so far. The injury bug has also been pretty brutal. You got Chris Tannen with that just awful injury, Scott Lawton, Austin Matthews in the IR, Anthony Stolarz now, Brandon Carlo day-to-day. I mean, Stolarz is brutal. He's had a horrible season up to this point. Joseph Woll just got back healthy, and Stolarz is on the IR. Just perfect timing, really. Let's talk about that goaltending, though, because that has been the second biggest issue for the Leafs. If the defensive structure hasn't been there, then the goaltending certainly has not made up for it. Anthony Stolarz might be the most disappointing player for me on the Leafs this season, because even though the defense is bad, I kind of expected that. But Stolarz was somebody that I was pretty high on entering the year, and I was even considering maybe like a top 5 guy for the Vezina this season. I thought we'd see him take a bit of a step after already playing pretty well last season, but getting more of a starter opportunity, especially with Joseph Woll out. But yeah, an .884 save percentage this year, a 3.51 goals against average. He has just not been what the Leafs have needed him to be. Now, granted, again, that defense has been really, really bad, so in terms of goals save of expected, he's still around an average level, but I don't think the Leafs needed an average goaltender as their starter. They needed somebody that can bail them out of games, and Stolarz just hasn't been able to do that so far. I would argue in a lot of games, Stolarz was doing that last season, getting a .926 save percentage last year, being among the best goalies in goals saved above expected. He was a big reason why, in my opinion, the Leafs were such a contender, such a interesting team up front. A lot of it was Stolarz and him doing a lot of that dirty work, but this year it's just not been the same way. But throwing out all the stats and everything, it just feels like the Leafs haven't been able to get that big save this season. There's been some moments here and there, but it's largely because of comeback wins from the offense and the forward group that the Leafs team actually stays relevant in any of these situations. In the goaltending department, they haven't been horrible, but they haven't been able to save these games from the defense that is just throwing them to the wolves every night. And I would argue the Leafs defense wasn't amazing last season, but the goaltending was able to make everything look a lot more structured and a lot more detailed. This season, though, the goaltending has gone back down to an average level, and it's made the defense look even worse. Don't even get me started on Kaden Primeau, who is just not an NHL goaltender in my opinion, but because of the Joseph Woll absence, had to play some games, and they went about for him as good as you could predict. An .838 save percentage, still a 2-1-0 record in those games, but I think that was more the Leafs just kind of going hero mode while he was in the net. So with the defense and the goaltending not living up to their standards, it's not really much of a surprise to see the Leafs down in the bottom of the standings with a 5-game losing streak. Now with superstars like Austin Matthews out as well, making those issues even more clear. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Matthews was fantastic before his injury either. I thought this was a bit of a prove-it season for him with Mitch Marner going off to Vegas in free agency, but he was okay, I would say, but definitely not up to his standards with just 14 points and 9 goals through 17 games. In fact, I would say besides Stolarz, Matthews, before his injury at least, was one of the more disappointing players for the Leafs, and honestly, now with the injury too, I think that makes it even more disappointing because you wanted to see Matthews actually have a fully healthy season, but kind of like Jack Hughes, it just feels like that's almost impossible nowadays. Really, unless John Tavares, William Nylander, and Matthew Knies are scoring in bunches, the Leafs don't really stand much of a chance. And I would argue in even the cases of players like Nylander, the defensive engagement there hasn't even been perfect, so you can't even rely on them to be unbelievable in all 3 zones. Nylander has still been unbelievable in the offensive end, but even he's kind of slowing down recently. Still though, 26 points in 16 games ain't half bad. The thing that really gets me here though is that you have so many issues in every single department here. With the forward group now, with the recent injuries, the defense all season, the goaltending, especially from your top end guy in Anthony Stolarz. So what the heck do the Leafs end up doing to try to fix this? Now, option 1 is to just ride it out. I don't know how successful that's gonna be. I'm gonna be honest. I think there are still some very clear, obvious issues. And even though I think the Leafs will improve a little bit, I don't know if it will be enough to make the playoffs in a very competitive Eastern Conference. Another option I've seen floated around, I don't know how seriously, but is for them to potentially go into retool or rebuild. One, that's absolutely not happening. They're definitely not going to do that in terms of the management positions, but also the Leafs are one of the teams out there that I think is in the worst position possible to rebuild. When you look at their picks in this next draft in 2026, they only have 2 of their own picks in the 3rd round and the 5th round. They traded the others, the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 7th rounder, and they also have San Jose's 6th rounder in this class. But then you go to the next class, and they trade away their 1st round pick in the Scott Lawton deal. brutal. They also trade away their 3rd round pick, and you start to see the issues here. If the Leafs are going to even contemplate a rebuild, they've already sunk themselves into this hole already. You can't really rebuild when you've already traded so many picks, so many prospects to build this mediocre iteration of the team. So for a Leafs team that doesn't have their 1st round picks in the next 2 drafts, doesn't have their 2nd rounder this year, their 4th rounder in this year's class, you kind of have to sit in the bed that you've made. And are they really going to try to fire a Craig Berube who they just hired last season? I don't really see that being the case either. Even though some people might say they should, I don't think Craig Berube has really been the problem. I think the problem is the team and the options that Berube has been given. You could place the best coach that has ever been created onto the Leafs right now, but they still had to play Felipe Myers, Simon Benoit, and Dakota Mervis on their defense. They're still not winning many games. The big problem I have with this Leafs team is that they were built to contend in the playoffs, play a heavy style game that could win them the Stanley Cup, but they're not good enough to make the playoffs to begin with. The only course forward, I think, for this Leafs team is just continue to dig their own hole. Try to make a trade, try to do something differently, and hope that when players like Brandon Carlo and Austin Matthews come back from their injuries, that it will just rebound by itself. It's really the only thing you can hope for right now. They're old, they have no cap space, they have no draft picks, they have basically no prospects coming up. The only ones they do have, and guys like Ben Danford, are basically the exact type of defenseman they already have so much of on this defense. Maybe a little bit better, but I don't think by that much. Truly, I don't envy the situation that the Leafs management is in, but quite frankly, they put themselves in this position. This is the team they wanted to build, and now they're in their bed and want to get out of it. I do still think eventually the Leafs will get slightly better. I still think they have a chance at the playoffs, and who knows what the heck happens from there. But I just think there are fundamental core flaws in this Leafs team that you're starting to see come out in full swing. We'll see what they end up doing, but I'm sure after a 5-game losing streak that it's getting pretty hot there in the Leafs front office, and I'm very curious to see what they do next, especially again with the little cap space, the little draft picks they have. It's going to be interesting here soon. But that's it for me when it comes to my thoughts on this Leafs team so far and what we could see in the future for them. It's going to be weird over the next couple months to see what that team ends up looking like. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Comment down below your thoughts on this Leafs team. What do you think they could do next? What moves do you think they'll make? Do you think there'll be firings, trades? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if you guys want some more videos, you can become a member here by hitting the join button next to the subscribe button or hitting the link in the description down below. Exclusive videos every single week coming to you guys. Plus, you can be, of course, a big part of the member polls every week and gets custom emoji for the comments down below as well. And if you want even more videos on top of that, you can click on this card for all my trade rumor content right in one playlist. But I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic hockey day and goodbye.